You just got a raise, maybe a big one, and for about 3 weeks you felt amazing. Then something shifted and somehow you feel just as financially stretched as before. Your income went up. Your savings didn't, and you have no idea where the money went. Here's the uncomfortable truth about your money brain. Let me paint a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. A few years ago, a woman named Claire, mid-30s, marketing manager, landed a promotion she'd been working toward for 2 years. Her salary jumped by almost $18,000 a year. That's real money. That's $1,500 extra a month hitting her bank account. She celebrated, she deserved to, and then she started making small adjustments. Nothing dramatic. She upgraded her gym membership because, hey, she'd earned it. She started getting a cleaner in once a fortnight. She moved apartments, just a slightly nicer building, slightly closer to the office. She upgraded her phone when the contract came up. She started ordering lunch instead of bringing it from home most days. None of these decisions felt like big choices. Each one felt completely rational in isolation. 6 months later, Claire sat down to look at her savings rate and found something alarming. It was almost identical to what it had been before the promotion. Not slightly lower, almost exactly the same. $1,500 a month had entered her life, distributed itself silently across a dozen small upgrades and vanished. She wasn't irresponsible. She wasn't reckless. She was experiencing one of the most well-documented and least talked about forces in behavioral economics, and it had eaten her raise whole before she even noticed it was hungry. This isn't a story about willpower. It isn't a story about being bad with money. It's a story about how your brain is wired to move a very specific goalpost every single time you get closer to it. And understanding exactly how that wiring works is the first step to doing something about it. The mechanism at work here has a name that sounds academic, but describes something you have felt in your bones. It's called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic just means relating to pleasure, and the plain language version is this. Your brain has a remarkable, almost cruel ability to treat new good things as the new normal, and then immediately start wanting something better. Think about the last time you bought something you'd really been looking forward to. A new phone, a better car, a nicer apartment. Remember how good it felt in the first week. Now think about how you feel about it today. That initial glow fades faster than almost anyone predicts it will, and researchers have shown this across decades of data on income, housing, consumer goods, and even major life events. Your brain essentially recalibrates its pleasure baseline upward to match your new circumstances. The technical term for that recalibration is the hedonic treadmill. You keep walking, the belt keeps moving, and you end up in exactly the same emotional place you started, just with higher monthly expenses. Here's what makes this particularly dangerous with money. The adaptation isn't just emotional, it becomes structural. When Claire upgraded her apartment, she didn't just feel good for a few weeks and then return to neutral while keeping the same rent. The higher rent was now locked in. The cleaner, the gym, the lunches, those became defaults, baseline expectations for her own life. And baseline expectations are almost impossible to walk back without it feeling like deprivation, even when nothing about your actual security has changed. Your brain doesn't experience cutting back from something you've normalized as maintaining the same lifestyle. It experiences it as losing ground. That's the real trap, not the spending itself, but the way every new spending level gets encoded as the floor, not the ceiling. Now here's the layer that makes hedonic adaptation even harder to catch in yourself. It doesn't arrive naked. It comes dressed in a very convincing story. And the story goes like this. You worked hard, you got rewarded, and now you are simply living at the level your work is worth. This isn't laziness. This isn't lack of discipline. This is your brain running a deeply human piece of social software called relative consumption, the tendency to measure your spending not against your own past self, but against the people around you at your new income level. When Claire moved into that nicer apartment, she wasn't comparing herself to who she was 2 years ago. She was comparing herself to her new colleagues, her new neighbors, the lifestyle she saw projected by people she now identified with. And by that reference group, her choices looked completely reasonable. The gym upgrade, everyone at her level has that. The cleaner, actually pretty standard. The nicer lunch spots. That's just where people like her eat. Behavioral economists call this reference group shift. When your income moves, your social comparison set moves with it, which means the finish line for feeling financially comfortable moves at exactly the same speed as your earnings. The insidious part is that this mechanism makes financial progress almost invisible from the inside. From the outside, Claire was earning significantly more and building a better life. From the inside, she felt roughly as financially comfortable or uncomfortable as she always had. She was richer by every objective measure, and yet the feeling of financial scarcity had barely shifted. That is not a character flaw. That is textbook hedonic adaptation compounded by reference group drift, and it is working on you right now, probably in ways you haven't noticed yet. Here's where the story takes a turn that most financial content won't tell you, because it's genuinely uncomfortable. The hedonic treadmill doesn't run at a constant speed. Research consistently shows that lifestyle inflation tends to accelerate at higher income levels, not slow down, and the reason is psychological leverage. When you earn more, each individual upgrade feels proportionally cheaper relative to your income, so the mental permission to spend becomes easier and easier to grant yourself. A $30 lunch when you were earning $40,000 a year felt like a splurge. A $30 lunch when you're earning $90,000 feels like nothing. It's practically free, relationally speaking. But $30 5 days a week is still $600 a month. The math doesn't care about your income bracket. Your brain, however, cares enormously, and it uses relative thinking, not absolute thinking, almost by default. This is sometimes called proportional thinking bias. We evaluate costs as a percentage of something rather than as a fixed amount, which means high earners consistently underestimate how much they are spending in absolute terms. There's a second twist inside this one. The people most likely to believe this doesn't apply to them are the people earning the most. High earners have the most compelling internal narrative. I've been responsible, I've been patient, I've gotten here through hard work, I deserve to enjoy it. And that narrative isn't wrong. The problem is that it functions as a psychological blind spot, a reason not to look too closely at where the money is actually going. Claire's story is common, but the version of it that plays out at $200,000 a year is quieter, better dressed, and costs significantly more. The mechanism is identical, only the zeros change. Let's make this concrete, because abstract psychology is easy to acknowledge and easy to ignore. What hedonic adaptation and lifestyle inflation actually cost you is not the money itself. It's the future that money could have become. Here's a simple way to think about it. If Claire had captured just half of that $18,000 raise, $9,000 a year, $750 a month, and invested it consistently over the next 30 years at a historically average market return, the compound growth on that money would be transformative. Not mildly helpful, life-changing, the purchases she made instead. The upgraded apartment she adapted to within 2 months, the gym membership she uses twice a week, the lunches that she genuinely doesn't remember, those things are gone. They delivered a brief hedonic bump that her brain immediately recalibrated around. And now, They exist only as a lower savings balance and a higher baseline of expected spending. This is the real cost of the hedonic treadmill. It doesn't just spend your money, it mortgages your future choices. Every lifestyle upgrade that becomes a fixed expectation is a commitment, a recurring vote against your future self's flexibility and security. And here's what makes it land hardest. Future you doesn't feel abstract when you're 62 and realizing your savings can't sustain the lifestyle you've been running for 20 years. Future you feels very, very real at that point. The research on retirement regret is consistent. Almost nobody says they wished they'd spent more in their 30s on nicer lunches. Almost everybody who didn't save enough wishes they'd started earlier, stayed the course, and not let the treadmill run quite so fast. The pleasure you gave up by saving was temporary. The security you gave up by not saving is permanent. So what do you actually do with this? Because knowing about hedonic adaptation doesn't automatically protect you from it. Awareness is necessary but not sufficient. Your brain will still adapt, still shift the goalposts, still tell the story about deserving. What you need is a structural intervention, not a motivation intervention. The first thing that actually works is what some behavioral economists call pre-commitment on income increases. The idea is simple. Before the raise hits your account, before you've adapted to a new normal, you decide what percentage of that increase goes directly to savings or investments, automatically, without it touching your day-to-day spending. If it never lands in your checking account, your brain never gets the chance to normalize having it available. Out of sight, never on the treadmill. The second thing is to audit your adaptation, not your spending. Most budgeting advice tells you to track where your money goes. That's useful, but it misses the psychological layer. What's more powerful is asking, which of my current expenses did I add in the last 12 months? And for each one, do I still notice it? Does it still deliver the pleasure it promised when I agreed to pay for it? If the answer is no, you found hedonic adaptation in the wild. You can make an informed decision about whether to keep it. The third thing is to build what I'd call a satisfaction floor rather than a spending ceiling. Instead of asking how much you can afford to spend, ask what level of spending genuinely makes you feel good, not compared to your colleagues, not compared to what you could theoretically afford, just what actually moves the needle on your daily satisfaction. Research consistently shows that number is lower than people expect, and that experiences tend to hold their hedonic value longer than possessions. The goal isn't to feel deprived. The goal is to stop letting your brain spend money on upgrades it will forget about in 6 weeks. The hedonic treadmill is one of the quietest and most expensive forces in your financial life, because it never feels like a problem while it's happening. But now, you can see it. Your money brain doesn't switch off when it comes to retirement. That's exactly where these biases cost the most. I built a free tool that shows you the real math, no spreadsheet required. It's called Granary, links in the description.